the Pakistanis claimed that they had put close to about 5,000 men, that is equivalent of about 5 battalions, into those intrusions that had taken all over. Now, an intrusion of that scale and scope raises a large number of questions. Questions on intelligence and surveillance of the Indian Army at that point of time. Questions on the operational posture of the Indian Army at that point of time. And I would also say a set of questions for the leadership at that point of time. But what is more important is that that was a time when India was running into a peace dialogue. So that was also the time when India was running into a peace dialogue with Pakistan. The bus yatra to Lahore had just taken place, which was followed by the Lahore Declaration. And from the Lahore Declaration, a large number of track dialogues were taking place. So the question is, why did Pakistan indulge in Kargil intrusions? That's a larger question. Why did they do that? Did they ever take the approval of the political leadership? And at a later stage, why they started reluctantly accepting that they had intruded into these areas? To answer some of these big questions, I have two discussants here. That's General Puri, who was just introduced, and General Ravin Khosla. What I must also tell you, beyond the bios that were read out, that both of them commanded the 8th Mountain Division 20 years apart. General Puri commanded the division during the Kargil operations, and Ravin commanded it, I think, in 2016 or 2017, around that time. Okay, nice. Also, they both happen to be from the Gurkhas. They both retired as deputy chiefs. And, of course, he's a Welhamite as well. Okay, so a round of applause for him as well. Now we'll run this panel. We do this in 3 parts. I'll first request Ravin to give an overview of the terrain. Once he's done that, then I would engage General Puri to a set of larger questions on the broader strategic context of that time. I would say a year preceding that, that is 1998. And then what were the Pak motivations to undertake those operations? And what are the operational challenges that he faced as the architect of Kargil victory, if I might say. So over to Ravin. Yeah.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, my good friends, the students who are here from, I'm told, 29 schools, which is really, really great, and the esteemed faculty members, the teachers who have accompanied the children, and of course the faculty of the Welhams Boys. As General Harinder just sneaked out, yes, I'm a very proud alum of the Welhams Boys, and I'm very happy to be here this morning interacting with the boys and girls of the Welhams Boys, of course, and the large number of schools who are here. It's indeed a matter of great pleasure for me. You are the brightest and the best, and the future, the destiny of the country is in your hands. I've been given the subject of setting a geographical context to the Kargil War, which I will do in about 10 to 12 minutes. I have certain maps and photographs, which I shall play for you. But before I do that, I just want to make a statement that geography is very powerful. Geography is something which is dictated, the manner in which the continents have been formed, the nation states have been formed, the manner in which the mountain ranges are arid, the river systems have flowed, the floodplains where the civilizations have grown up, whether it was the Indus civilization, the Mohenjo-daro, the Harappa, or the civilization along the Nile River Valley. The manner in which tribes have migrated and settled and nation states have come up. This is all part of geography. And some of you who are academically inclined or fond of reading, I can recommend two books to you, both by the same author, Tim Marshall. The first book is Prisoners of Geography, and the second is Power of Geography. At least some of the staff members, I'm sure, could pick up these books and probably share some of the important facets in the chapters that have been covered. Okay, with that little broad overview, I come straight away into the subject. And like we like to do in the army, we like to take what we call a helicopter view. We'll take a broad overview of how, the whole thing has evolved. And I think there's no better place to start. Okay, yeah, we're ops. So the first thing in front of you is a physical map which indicates the Pamir Knot, which is in today Tajikistan. Why is it important? Because 5 of the most important mountain ranges emanate from the Pamir Knot. It's also called the roof of the world. Some of you may have heard Tibet is also called the roof of the world, but Pamir Knot, actually this area is contiguous. And you have actually the highest mountain peaks in the world are in this region. You have the Mount Everest, you have the K2, you have the Nanga Parbat. All the highest mountain peaks are in this region. To the north, you have the Tian Shan, you have the Kunlun, you have the Karakoram, you have the Himalayas, and you have the Hindu Kush. The area of interest for us for today's discussion is the area which lies between the Karakoram and the Greater Himalayas. Now we move on to a political map. You can see the contours of the state of J&K. And again, you can see very clearly the Karakoram, the Greater Himalayas. Between these lie a number of other mountain ranges which are also significant but considerably smaller, but on the ground they are very, very formidable. I can assure you. You have the Ladakh range, you also have the Zanskar. South of the Greater Himalayas, you have the Pir Panjal, and then you have the Shivalik ranges. I now bring you into the area of Ladakh. I will guide you through this area through a road move. We will start with the area of Jammu, which is here. You go by the National Highway and you go up across the Pir Panjal mountain ranges. Those of you who have traveled by road, you cross in the area of the Banihal Pass. Across the Banihal, of course, is the lovely Kashmir Valley. You go north of the Kashmir Valley, you cross the Greater Himalayas, you cross in the area of Zojila Pass. The Zojila Pass is covered by snow for about 5 to 6 months in a year. And therefore there are distinct populations which have emerged because of this diversity. You have the Kashmiris who are settled in the Kashmir Valley and the Ladakhis in the area of Ladakh. Very distinct cultures have emerged in the two regions. The National Highway thereafter goes down and goes to the area of Leh. You must realize in 1999 when the Kargil War happened, This was the only axis, this was the only way in which you could actually get to the Ladakh Valley and get your rations, your supplies, your FOL, etc., including movement of troops into the area of Leh. The other axis, I'll also show that to you. That is the one which starts from Himachal, goes through Manali. You would have all have heard of the Rohtang Pass, the very famous Rohtang Tunnel. This was at that time still under construction, and it could not take any sustained traffic. And therefore, the significance of the national highway must be understood in this context. The great power of geography, as I told you, the areas west of the greater Himalayas is absolutely lush green. I'm sure you've eaten apples from Kashmir, you've had walnuts from Kashmir. But the moment you cross the greater Himalayas, on the other side, in the area of Dras, it is totally barren. I will show you certain photographs hereafter. The area is barren, and it has implications on military operations, as we shall see. So these ridge lines or these ranges create their own ecosystems, as we must understand them. The other very important feature in this map that I want you to understand is the Saltoro ridgeline. You have the Siachen Glacier on this. The Siachen Glacier is an occupation of the Indian Armed Forces since 1984 and has always been a sore thumb for the Pakistanis. And one of the reasons for this Kargil intrusion could have been triggered by this particular area that is held with us very strongly, very firmly, the area of the Siachen Glacier. Another very important feature of this area is the Indus River. It rises in the east in the Kailash Mountains, somewhere in this area. It traverses through the entire Ladakh. It goes through Nimu, Leh, goes to the area of Biama, Batalik. Then it crosses over into the POK, Pakistani held Kashmir, flows in a northwesterly direction before turning south. The Indus River system is one of the largest. It's the sixth largest river system in the world. It feeds the entire Pakistan. It drains down into the south, into the Indian Ocean. It's a very important river system for the Pakistanis, but you must understand it rises in the area of Ladakh. It flows through Ladakh. And there's an Indus Valley Treaty, Indus River Treaty, which we have honor, which we've been honoring all this along. But that option is always there of this treaty being revoked. The river system is very, very important to Pakistan. Okay, now we get closer to the area of operations, and we come into this area which is really where the operations took place. The ranges to see in this area, again starting from the west, this is the greater Himalayas. On this is the Zojila Pass. You have the national highway which enters through here. The important ranges here are the greater Himalayas. You've got the Ladakh range. You've got the Zanskar range. The important river systems, there are primarily two. One is the Shingo River, which flows from a west to east direction. It enters the Indian territory in the area of Kaksar. Thereafter, it flows for about 30 odd kilometers. It is joined by two more rivers, the Suru River and the Wakharong, before it flows back into the POK. The other important river system is the Indus, which I told you about. It rises in the east in the Kailash Mountains. It flows through the entire Ladakh region. And it finally comes to the area of Batalik before it flows into what is now POK. One very important feature in this map which I want to explain to you is not a physical feature, but it is this purple line that you must be wondering what it is. So my friends, this is called the LC, the line of control. Normally between countries you have something called an international border, which is clearly demarcated. You have boundary pillars which are geotagged. The international border runs between these boundary pillars. Whereas in this area of Jammu and Kashmir, in 1947 there was raiders and the Pakistanis had tried to capture this area. The Indian Army had managed to push them back. Could actually throw them on from the entire J&K. Unfortunately, in 1948, there was a ceasefire which was declared. And because of the ceasefire in 1948, we now hold the area which is depicted by this line of control. We hold the area which is to the south of it, and the area north of it is held by the Pakistanis. So it's a quirk of fate that in 48, because of the ceasefire, the entire area could not be recaptured. As far as the roads are concerned, we get back to the National Highway 1, which enters Ladakh in the area of Zojila. It goes through this entire area, it goes to Kargil, then goes south and it goes towards the area of Leh. What you must see very closely is the proximity of this national highway to this purple line or the line of control. And it is closest is in the area of Dras. It is only 9.7 kilometers from the line of control. It is actually within range of the weapon systems. But in 99, General Musharraf got greedy and he thought he could just transgress this territory, come across the line of control and come and sit astride the road axis. That's the national highway. That was the ultimate aim. And he would be able to choke off the entire Indian Army which was deployed and also the population of Ladakh which is in this region. There is also another road which starts from Kargil, which links up to Batalik. There's a pass here called the Hemotingla Pass. But this Hemotingla Pass is under observation of the Pakistanis, and any movement we do across it, they're able to actually note down the number of vehicles which cross. Therefore, it has its own disadvantages. This road axis thereafter moves along the Indus River and goes and joins the national highway a little ahead in a place called Khalsi. So these are the important roads in this area. The area of operation, as has been briefly mentioned earlier, is divided basically into 4 areas. You have the Mashko Dras area, you have the Kargil, you have Batalik, and you have the Turtuk Siachen area. In the next couple of slides, I'll show you certain photographs. Some of you will be able to relate to these photographs, which are very famous, like the Tiger Hill, etc. And some of you may not have seen them. It will be a good education. So this is a photograph which has been taken from the south of the Dras town. As you can see, this is the Dras town. This is the Dras river. And these are the heights in front of you where the bulk of the operations of Kargil were fought. The very famous conical peak in the center is the Tiger Hill. To the west is the Batra top, where Captain Batra gave his life to recapture this territory. It is named after him as the Batra top. Also, this feature of Tololing has been mentioned. I'm sure you've heard of Tololing. This again is a very significant feature, as a very important battle was fought here. In the course of the next day and a half, you will be made familiar with all these battles which have been conducted in these areas. So you could just remember some of these areas like 3 Pimple, 4700 and the area of 5140. These are certain closer photographs. You could kind of associate with them as you, by and by, you are told about these in your interaction with the resource people. You know, as you can see very clearly, something that I told you a little earlier, the stark contrast in the geography on the west of the Himalayas and the east of the Himalayas. These mountains, as you can see, are totally barren. There is not a speck of grass which grows in these areas. They're absolutely barren. There is, you know, you can see actually for kilometers you can see. There is no place you can really hide from the enemy, if I may use the word. This is the area of Kargil. There was really one significant area where they came in, that is indicated by the Bajrang Glacier. And this again will be explained to you as you interact with the resource persons. Then you come into the area of Batalik, where again the intrusions were fairly significant. The intrusions happened along the Jubar, the Kukurthang, Kalubar and point 5203. As you can see, they are largely along the ridge lines. You know, this is the Jubar, this is the Kukurthang, this is the Kalubar, with the idea being that these ridge lines overlook the Indus River. And that road that I explained to you, which goes from Kargil over Hematingla and goes down into Batalik and then onwards towards Khalsi, runs all along this Indus River. So if they were to be sitting on these heights, as they had planned to, they would have prevented any movement along any of these roads. You know, no troops could have moved up along this road. So the idea again in this area was very clear: dominate the road axis, choke the Indian army, and subsequently carry out further operations. Just as an aside, since it's been explained, I've commanded in this area. There's a place called Chor Batla. It's very interesting because historically, this was the route which the thieves, the chors used to use when they used to go north, raiding into the area of Gilgit and Skadu, which is across these mountain ranges. And on their way back, they would come back into the area of Ladakh through this particular pass. Allah means a pass. So Chor Batla was used extensively by these robbers or thieves or brigands. And therefore this name, but this name has stayed on. It is still called Chor Batla. And of course the fourth area is this area which is adjoining the Siachen Glacier, also called the subsector Hanif. More of it in your interaction with the resource persons. As far as the strategic importance is concerned, I'm sure by now it would have dawned on you that National Highway 1 was very, very important and critical to us to be able to sustain not only our troops but the civilian population living in Ladakh. And therefore, the dominating heights overlooking the National Highway became very, very important for us to recapture. Certain peculiarities of terrain, the hill features, etc. How is it that, what are the important derivatives from this? What is it, how does it, help a soldier? What is it that you must look at when you see a particular feature? What is it that some ideas must come to your mind as to what is it that it does for you or it goes against you? Okay, the first is that you must understand that, this battle was fought at these heights, which is ranging from about 17 to 19,000 feet. 19,000 feet is the kind of height where normally civilians plan their mountaineering expeditions. They plan expeditions at 17, 18, 19,000 feet. They plan for months and then they prepare, they acclimatize and then they go and do these expeditions. These are the heights, these are the altitudes where people were actually rushing, they were running up the heights and capturing features. The degree of difficulty is something that you can just try and imagine and comprehend. The atmosphere at these heights is rarefied. That means the oxygen content is actually less or low. And the fact that there is no vegetation here aggravates the situation. In regions like Kashmir Valley, at the same altitude, because you have a lot of trees and you have a lot of vegetation, the oxygen content is much better. In Ladakh, the opposite is true. Because of lack of vegetation, there is lack of oxygen. And of course, I've already spoken about the features being barren, there is no cover. So if you're moving up the hill, it's very easy to be picked up by the enemy from very long distances or long ranges. So that was a major, major challenge when the troops started to go uphill and counter the enemy and throw him out from the areas he had occupied. Weather, of course, is one of the enemy because it's very fickle. It changes very quickly. You can have bright sunshine and immediately, like you had yesterday in the afternoon here, you had a solid downpour. That happens very, very often there. Or you can have, snowfall. You can have very, very heavy snowfall at times. So the weather is very fickle, and it's an enemy there actually, really. Low temperatures and scarcity of water, I think, would be well appreciated, because most of the water has to be fetched up from the rivers. So you're sitting at 19,000 feet, very unlikely that you'll have a water source near you. So either you depend on the snow which has fallen in that area, so you collect the snow, you melt it, and you turn it into water and you drink it. And by, as the snow starts melting, you have to go further and further away to collect fresh snow, bring the snow to where you're staying, melt it, and then convert it into water. So very simple things which you take for granted in your life become challenges when you're operating or you're staying in these very, very high altitude and difficult terrain areas. And of course, it gives you certain implications. The first being that if you're sitting on the height, as would be obvious to you by now, you're at a great advantage. So the Pakistanis who had intruded into our area were sitting at the heights. And they had a great advantage over us who had to actually climb up and assault and evict, kill and throw them out. Extreme low temperatures, of course, not only affect the human body, it also affects your weapons, it affects the ammunition, it affects the way some of your important critical equipment behaves. Even that gets affected. Of course, lack of oxygen I've spoken about. As some of you may have gone for some treks, the higher altitude, you tend to get tired a little faster, you get tired earlier. So you have to be really physically very strong, mentally very strong to be able to operate in these areas. And of course the logisticians, because you have to resupply the troops in those areas. So just as an example, for example, the rations will come by road. If all the way from Jammu, for example, it will come to Dras in a vehicle. Then be broken into smaller portions, maybe bags of 20 kgs. Is put into smaller vehicles, probably jeeps and smaller vehicles. It is then transported to a base camp. Then that 20 kg pack is converted probably into a 14 kg pack, which is loaded onto a mule. Then the mule will take it up. There are certain posts where mules can't go. Then you break it into 10 kgs, because that is the weight that a porter can carry at those high altitudes. Then that 10 kg pack is loaded on his back, and then he will take this ration and take it up to where the troops are staying in the posts on top of these features. So it's a huge nightmare. You have to plan for this entire chain of how and where the bulk breaking will happen, and how the rations and how the supplies and how the ammunition will go up. So that's about all that I had as far as the setting of the context or the geographical background was concerned. I hope I've been able to impress upon you adequately that it was a very, very difficult area, and the battles which were fought to recapture the area were extremely valiant and something that we need to be really, really proud of. Thank you.
Thank you, General Raveen, for that presentation. You would have noted that during the course of his presentation, he talked about the purple line. And I think for the young fellows who are sitting here, it'll be good to query your resource persons in the later sessions as to what exactly is this purple line. This purple line, what is also called as the line of control, as to how this line is different from an international boundary, or how would that be different from a working boundary, or how is that different from a line that we refer to as the AGPL, Actual Ground Position Line in the Siachen sector. So when you look at the western front, starting from the Sir Creek area, right up to Indra Col, that's at Siachen, you first start with a very complicated demarcation of the water boundaries. In the Sir Creek, then you have the international boundary, then there is a little segment which is referred to as the working boundary. And thereafter you have this so-called purple line, the line of actual control. And then the AGPL that goes beyond NJ 9842. So I'm sure, much of this discussion can take place at a later stage. So let me now move on to General Puri. Sir, in the month of May 1998, you took over command of 8th Mountain Division. 8th Mountain Div was then part of the valley. Your headquarters were located at Sharifabad. And you were largely looking at the year 1998. So when we look back at that year, a year prior to the Kargil operations, we recall that both India and Pakistan conducted the nuclear tests. So the Indian tests were on 11th and 13th of May, and I think 2 weeks later, the Pakistanis also came up with a set of detonations that they said that they were one more than the Indians. We did 5 detonations and they did 6 detonations. That was also the year that when we saw the rise of Taliban in Afghanistan. And as Taliban grew in Afghanistan, we also had a very large influx of foreign terrorists in Kashmir. And they were called as FTs. When the FTs entered Kashmir, 2 things happened. One, they brought in a culture of an idea of IEDs, improvised explosive devices. That was a time, for the first time, we had IEDs coming into the valley in a very large scale. And the second thing they brought in were the famous ICOM sets. Okay. So, when you look back, well, that particular year, 1998, was all about insurgency, was all about militancy, was all about, all that what was happening on this side of Zozila Pass. So, what was as a GOC of 8th Mountain Division, what was your reading of the broader strategic context? Did you ever think that a year later you'll be moving to the other side of the pass?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank Mr. Darshan for getting us over here. Admiral Arun, Prakash, I've always been an admirer of yours, sir, in uniform as well as in the civil street. And Principal, Madam Sangeeta Ken, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Now, it's always a privilege to be talking to you. And now, getting back to the question which I've been asked, I took over 8th Mountain Division in March 98. Now, at that time, the insurgency was well under our control. I'll talk about the nuclear aspect a bit later when we discuss subsequent issues. The insurgency was well under our control. We had seen the highs of it in the early 90s to mid 90s. And if you recall, in 1996, the elections were held in J&K and an elected government was in place. That is the National Conference. So the political situation was quite congenial and comfortable as far as conduct of military operations were concerned. But like Harinder just mentioned, the Afghanis had started coming in, the foreign terrorists had started coming in. While we had control over the valley, we had control over the local population, but we had no control over these foreign terrorists who were coming in. And somehow they had developed a very intricate and a very intelligent system by which they could communicate with each other very effectively. The communication setup had technologically improved considerably. And there was generally the feeling in all our contacts with the terrorists that there were more foreign terrorists than the indigenous ones. Just to give you an example, there were about, I think, if I go as per the ratio, there were 70% of foreign terrorists and 30% of the local terrorists. Now, the local terrorists, whoever was there, are very effective programs of winning the hearts and minds of the population, were producing tremendously good results. Now, if you see the history of the valley and the culture of the valley, the women play a very, very important part. The children, the mothers, they have an absolute control over the household. And wherever we were sort of engaged in anti-insurgency operations, or when a contact had been established, whether they were foreign nationals or whether they were indigenous foreign terrorists or indigenous terrorists, they could get a safe a safe harbor in these houses, local houses, and these women used to protect them. So if the security forces went into an operation, they would make a sort of a, ring around the security forces and impede any progress of the operation. So effective programs to win over the hearts and minds of the people were having tremendous, we were getting very good results because of that. And I think that was before 98, the emphasis was on that. A lot of programs had come up, bridges had been made, roads had been developed by the army. Sadbhavna operation was launched in a very big way, where army schools had been opened, and these created a tremendous amount of goodwill amongst the local population, and that is how the intensity of the operations had reduced considerably. But what was very dangerous for the security forces was the creation of the IEDs, the improvised explosive devices. One just didn't know where this could pop up. And what was the impact of this on conduct of military operations? That every road which had to be traversed, we had to commit a lot of manpower in keeping the road communication open. Because IEDs could just be planted anywhere on the roads. So the road opening parties, from morning till evening, we were making sure that the roads were kept open, the communications were kept open, and that was generally what the state was. As far as terrorism was concerned, we had just to give you an example, before I came, the division was having about 400 to 500 terrorists killed per year. That's a very large number. But when we came, we had about 200 to 250 was the maximum which we had in that particular year before Kargil. So really what I'm trying to tell you is that we had gained superiority over the insurgents and the terrorists, and the situation was well under our control by the time the Kargil operation got started.
So, sir, as you explained that the militancy was in a way ebbing off, so then what we now want you to explain us is what were the larger Pak motivations then to intrude into Kargil? More so that as I said earlier, that the peace dialogue was already on. Prime Minister Vajpayee had led the bus yatra to Lahore, and then that was followed by the signing of the Lahore Declaration. And post that, there were a lot of interactions taking place at the diplomatic level to settle matters to an extent. So one is that there was peace looking beyond the horizon, but then you had this clique of generals who were plotting for different reasons to intrude into Kargil. Now, people say that Kargil was done in a way to internationalize what was otherwise happening in Kashmir, on one hand, or it was to take a revenge of all that what happened in Siachen in the years before that, okay, or for the reasons that there was a kind of a nuclear parity between India and Pakistan at that point of time, that the Pakistanis felt that they had that space to push India on that count. So in your view, what would be the motivation? What could have been the motivations? And how would you rank them in that order? What was most important and what was less important?
I think basically Pakistan, right from the time of independence, has considered J&K as an unfinished agenda. They lost the war in 47, 48, then came 65. They got a, well, it was a draw, but more in our favor than in theirs. Then you had the 71 war, which broke the country into two parts. A new country was created. Then we had Siachen. Now, when I told you about the situation in the valley, it was the type of normalcy which was being returned. The Pakistanis, they wanted to inflict the insurgency on us on the religious grounds and inflict 1,000 cuts on us. And it was a well-planned, well-orchestrated sort of strategy to change the mindset of the local population there. But when they found that we had gained some supremacy in the valley, normalcy was restored, then they had to do something else. Also, along with this, the international, the Committee of Nations had not, the Kashmir issue was not any longer on the radar of the UN screen or any of the other international forums. So they had to recreate this and internationalize the J&K issue. A very important aspect in their overall strategy was to change the alignment of the line of control. And you see they used Indus River as an obstacle in the eastern part of Ladakh. And on our side, they used the national highway. So they wanted to capture maximum area north of these two major geographic features and change the alignment of the line of control. And that was during the summer months. If we had not succeeded, they would have consolidated their gains. Come winter, heavy snowfall, roads closed, and in the next campaigning season, it would have been well nigh impossible for us to evict them. So these were some of the issues which were, I'm sure, playing at the back of General Musharraf's mind. And that is why he started this operation, notwithstanding the politics which was going on at that time, where the Prime Minister had visited Pakistan in February. The whole declaration was signed. But still the planning for the Kargil operations had commenced more or less simultaneously. And that is where, I think the nuclear aspect which you mentioned, the 98 May nuclear explosion by both sides, they thought that by capturing a sizable amount of our area in a surprise operation, they would then get the international community to put pressure on India. Because of the nuclear parity between the two countries and the nuclear threshold not being crossed by either of the two countries, the West would put pressure on us for a ceasefire and thereby Pakistan claiming all the areas which they were captured. I think this was the broad strategy in which they were working.
We'll have one more question, sir. In your book, for those who have not read his book, Kargil, Turning the Tide, I think you must read that. That's a very interesting read at the operational level. In that book, sir, you write at one place where you say that you were on a short holiday at Bangalore when General All, who's sitting here, that you gave him a call, that the formation is now being asked to move from Kashmir Valley to Dras Kargil sector. So as GOC 8 Mountain Div, to move a mountain division, which is about 16,000 or 18,000 men and X thousand vehicles and all that, to move them from one sector to another sector, what were the challenges that you have in terms of mobilizing your division, in the reorientation of the role that you had? You were here involved in a militancy operation, and now there's something else that is coming up there. And then also, you move into a new area. You by that time, I think you also knew as to that the larger intelligence was lacking, and you were required to undertake some kind of eviction operations there. So how did you in a way kind of take these big planning challenges that you had or hurdles that you had to yourselves?
Yeah, Harinder, I think the issue of the basic challenge, which was of the terrain, has been well covered by Raveen. So I don't want to repeat that, all the issues which he's covered about, the high altitude, the impact of the high altitude, and how difficult it is to negotiate heights. And, remember that the soldiers had to move with about 25 to 30 kgs on their back. This was a very, very difficult task to expect a soldier to move with that type of weight at heights which are varying from 12,000 to 18,000 feet. So, and the soil is so loose in these areas that if you walk one step, you go down two steps. There's scarcity of water right on top, whereas the soldiers had to then resort to melting snows for their water requirements. So these were some of the very major issues as far as the topography was concerned. Now, as far as the communications were concerned, we had only one highway in which three infantry division had to be sustained for their winter stocking, as well as the Leh garrison had to be sustained, as well as Siachen had to be sustained. So there was one division, one road access, that is the national highway. And about 80% of our stocking used to be done on this highway. The Upshi Manali, which Raveen had mentioned, this was still, the infrastructure had not developed on that highway, with the result that only about 15 to 20% was the type of traffic which was moving on that. On top of that, you had 8 Mountain Division. Now, 8 Mountain Division came with its integral RT, which was not adequate. So the reinforced artillery, the Bofors came in, and we were short of artillery, and we were seeing the dominating heights on which the enemy was occupying his defenses. And that is when General Lakwinder came up with this idea of innovation. I mean, he took the Bofors gun, which had just got inducted into the sector, and he used it in a direct firing role. Now, normally it's a high angle, artillery is normally used in a trajectory role, but here he used it in a direct firing role. And this one single sort of a innovation changed the concept of the employment of artillery as far as the Bofors are concerned. Bofors was, if you remember, a maligned gun. Besides the cost, it had cost the government. And, but I think the advantages which we got out of this were tremendous. And it was a battle-winning factor as far as the land operations were concerned. You'll hear more about it when the syndicates touch on this. Now, the other major challenge was the mindset. Changing of the mindset is very important. For years, right from its raising, 8 Mountain Division in the east was dealing with Nagaland. Then they came to J&K and they were dealing with the insurgency. So their mindset was totally oriented toward counter-insurgency operations. Nobody was worried about conventional operations. And I remember when I was in Sharifabad, the higher command course came, and one of the students asked me a question. He said, how long would you take in case you're required? I was the command reserve also. How long would you take to respond to a conventional war? So I said 3 months. I hope it's got nothing to do this with my talk. Huh? Okay, I said 3 months. But so I said 3 months. But just within 6 months of that, I was inducted into Kargil with just about a week's notice. But, so the mindset of the entire division had to be changed, changing them from, and I think the commanders, and the commanding officers, Yogi Joshi is here, Brigadier Admiral is here. Then later on, the vice chairman came with his para brigade. All these were add-on factors which added to the sort of success of the operations. And when the division got inducted, we gave them time, you know. I didn't want to rush into the operation. I said there should be adequate time for us to prepare, because hastily done operations were costing us heavy casualties. We had not acclimatized, so our high altitude casualty list was up to 60% in a battalion. So these were all very demoralizing thoughts. So we deliberately took about 12, 13 days to acclimatize, prepare ourselves for the battle, you know, refine our battle procedures and battle drills. And that's how we got the ball rolling. Leadership was another important aspect. And I think our young leadership, that stood us in tremendously goodwill. They are the ones who were responsible, young leaders, young officers. Then you had these two Param Vir Chakras whom you saw. They were the ones who really gave us the victory which we finally got. And here in leadership, I just want to again, I often give this incident about how leadership can transform battle operation. You know, I was, after the capture of Tolaling, 13 Jackrif, which Yogi Joshi was the 2IC. They were moving to Saharanpur, they were recalled, and I had to push them up as for the next phase after Tolaling. So Yogi Bakshi was there, and after the first successful operation, we were all on a very high. The Prime Minister was to visit us, but my headquarters got bombarded by the enemy in a very heavy way. So we had to cancel that visit. But nevertheless, when I went to the brigade headquarters of Amarall, the CO of 13 Jackrif was moving around over there. And I said, "Why are you here?" He said, "I'm pushing my stuff up." I said, "You should be on top." So he said, "Sir, I'm not well and all." I said, "Okay, you go to the hospital." And Yogi, I rang him up. I said, "I'm sending you your badges of rank. You've approved for a lieutenant colonel. You wear your badges of rank, and from now onwards, you're the CO of this battalion." And to his credit, he transformed the complete mindset of that battalion from a very mediocre battalion which was operating in counterinsurgency operations. They got the bravest of the brave at the unit citation of the Chief of the Army Staff. And many other units also did likewise. And why I wanted to highlight this incident was basically to tell you how the junior leadership and the middle level leadership transformed the entire conduct of the war. It is to their credit and their credit alone that we got the victory. And I think they were the brigade commanders who were suffering the privations of the COs and the men. They were right up front. And I think it was an excellent team which finally produced these results. And I think that was basically the...
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I had a couple of questions for General Raveen as well. But since we are short on time, we are open to questions now. So we'll take about 3 questions at a time. And the speakers to just get up, give out your name and the school which you belong to. Yeah.
Good afternoon, sir. I think one thing we can, I'm Hans Parish, I'm from Welhams Boys School. I'm in grade 10th right now. I think one thing we can all take away from today's talk is that when you were climbing these terrains, you had to go through great physical difficulties and even technical difficulties. You had no cover, you had to deal with constant gunfire. What I want to ask you here is that even if a person has that iron will, even if a person has that determination to complete the task for his nation, how does he or she overcome the fear of death in those instances?
Yeah, good question. Now it's directed directly at me. You know, the GOC has a bit of a role in making sure that he runs a happy team. He gives the resources where they are required. He allocates the tasks to the people, and he goes and talks to the people and interacts with them. resource management is the most important thing for a person at the level at which I was operating. Which battalion to send, when to send, how to send, what is the administrative logistic backup which is required, how to produce these resources, how to manage the environment in my particular area, that is how to manage the senior headquarters, because sometimes the pressures do come on you. So you don't want these pressures to go down, permeate down to the lower level. You want to make sure that the buck stops at your level, and the subordinate commanders are not unnecessarily taxed as far as these pressures and all are concerned, though there were not many pressures which were put on me, but nevertheless, I myself had my own internal pressures, but I made sure that I didn't pass them on to the subordinates. So I think, by and large, the GOC has a large canvas to cover, and yeah, he's not firing the gun, but he's the man behind the gun.
Okay, next question.
Use the mic, please.
Good morning, sir. I'm Cadet Gurkirat Singh from RIMC Dehradun, sir. Recently, I was reading a book named Dispatches from Kargil, written by Sanjoy Chaudhary, sir. Over there, I learned that I read that once Indian Army captured point 5353, over there they got some register in which the dates mentioned were February 1998 and about March 1998. So does it indicate that the Pakistani army had carried out a smaller scale incursion in the year 1998, and they checked that if the Indians caught them or not? And because if they were registers such as for pay scale or just normal register, then why will they bring it to war?
Okay, okay, please sit down. Now this point 5353 is something which came, which is an issue which has not been totally resolved. I think, it is something which keeps cropping up at regular intervals. Now 5353 is a very, very dominating feature in Dras. If you see the description of this feature and related to the delineation talks and the delineation of that area, you will find that 5353 comes a bit onto the Pakistan side. Now, our reservation, I didn't mention about the challenges. Our reservation was that we were given the terms of reference of not crossing the line of control. And for any operation, if we had to capture 5353, which Brigadier Admiral was absolutely ready to do, but we had this reservation of crossing the line of control, and therefore we couldn't capture it. But in all topographic maps which you see, we had the Roltas give a presentation to the Defense Minister also, where this feature comes onto the Pakistan side. But you're right, as far as, they didn't start intruding in February 98, but definitely towards the winter of 98, early winter of 99, the intrusion would have started. And they were pretty well prepared as far as the stocking was concerned, as far as their defenses were concerned, in all these areas which they came and occupied over a frontage of 135 kilometers.
Yes.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, we can have the next question. Yes, you.
I'm Tamanna. I'm from Modern School Vasant Vihar, and one thing that really spoke to me in this session was when you said that basic amenities that we all take for granted become challenges when you're serving your country. And I was curious as to how the terrain of Kargil impacted like the medical services available to the soldiers.
So, I think, can we ask him?
Yeah. Okay, yeah, really, that's a very good question, because, like I said, that the altitudes at which these, which the troops are deployed, firstly, most of the posts are like super high altitude. Then the second thing you must understand is the numbers. Most of these posts are held by 8 to 10, 12, 14 boys at the most. So most of these posts, since you mentioned medical, I'll dwell a little on that. There is no question that you can put a doctor in each of these posts. There's a doctor between, who looks after the entire battalion. So you have something called nursing assistants who are trained professionally to be like nurses, right? Male nurses. So you go beyond that and you train your own boys. Soldiers are trained actually to be able to take care of medical emergencies. Because in those isolated posts, and the weather, like I said, is very fickle, you may not be able to get a helicopter to pick up a boy who's really unwell. So then you have to really bank on the medical training that has been imparted to you, and you have to be able to help your soldiers who are on that post with you. So that is one. The second, of course, is like I said, basic amenities, water, scarcity of water. It can be heating. You have your FOL is very, very, very scarce and a precious resource. You need to run your generators because your generators consume FOL. You need to run generators because you need to recharge your batteries. It's not for the heating, but it's more for recharging the batteries which run your communication system. So whatever else is left over, that you probably use for the heating of your living accommodation. But largely you have to cater first and foremost is for your operational task, and that is for charging of your batteries. So medical, of course, is a huge challenge. And yes, we do have a fair amount of casualties who take place due to weather-related casualties. Even as we speak, there can be medical sort of emergencies which may be occurring in this area of 8 Mountain Division. But you have to live with it. There are people who lose their lives, still happens. There are people who lose their limbs because another thing that happens is, you get thrombosis, the blood sort of coagulates, and then, the only solution is to be able to amputate a limb or, something like that. That's a easy way out. So you're absolutely right. These are challenging areas, but the fact is that you have to be there. The Indian Army has to be there. The Indian Army is deployed there. But we find ways and means of overcoming it by some, by some improvisations and some other means. Yeah. Hope that answers your question. Okay.
So do we have time to take...
Delegates will be having the last question.
Okay, fine. Last question. Yeah, this boy sitting here.
Hello, I'm Raj from Mayo College, Ajmer. I just wanted to ask that in sensitive war-like situations, what do you think is more important, camaraderie or victory?
I think both are important. And one can't function without the other. Unless you don't have the camaraderie, victory will not come your way. A man who's fighting shoulder to shoulder with you has to support you, and you have to support him. And it is only a question of teamwork which will finally get you the success, will get you the victory. It can't be that you're fighting with your buddy and you expect him to help you out when you're in a dire situation during the conduct of the operation. So both go hand in hand, and you can't divorce one from the other.
So let us close the panel here now. Let me thank both the panelists. And I'm sure in the follow-on sessions, you will have many more questions to be posed to the resource persons. I think the questions that are most important are that why did Kargil happen? Why did Pakistan do what it did? Two, why did they hide the entire idea from the political leadership? What are the reasons for that? And three, as to how did the Indian Army, or I would say the Indian Armed Forces, after the initial set of reverses, really ramped up the effort to put in a big victory at the end of this some 56-60-day-old war. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.